Welcome to Life Stories, where survival isn't just about making it through the storm, it's about who's still standing when the clouds finally clear. What would you do if the very people who abandoned you at your lowest showed up years later, not to say sorry, but to claim what you built without them? This is the story of a woman who lost everything, rebuilt herself from scratch, and then had to make the most impossible choice of all: protect her peace or protect the illusion of family. It's raw, it's personal, and it might just hit closer to home than you expect. Stay with us because the moment she opens that front door, everything changes. Let's begin. It was Sunday morning, and the sky over East Austin was painted a soft gray, the kind that made the coffee steam from Harper Lane's mug curl like memory. She sat on the back porch of the modest three-bedroom house she'd bought with nothing but raw determination and a 680 credit score, wrapped in her favorite navy robe, watching the birds jostle for space on the feeder she'd installed last fall. Her hands were warm around the ceramic, her heart beat steady for the first time in years. 3 years ago, this kind of peace had been unthinkable. Back then, Harper had been a rising marketing strategist at Brightside Media. She had a neat apartment, a 5-year-old Corolla, and a belief, naive, in retrospect, that her family might be her safety net if things ever went wrong. But when the layoffs came, fast and merciless, she discovered her safety net was made of threads that snapped under the slightest pressure. Her father, Rick, hung up on her mid-sentence. "You should have planned better," he'd said, voice devoid of warmth. Her mother, Carol, offered shallow condolences and asked if she'd tried giving up Let's. Her brother Tyler, who she'd once floated $2,000 to when he was drowning in debt, laughed bitterly and said, "Maybe now you'll learn how the real world works." The silence afterward was louder than any rejection. She lost the apartment, slept in her car, showered at Planet Fitness, ate peanut butter on spoonfuls of shame. No one called. Not once. And now, as the sun crept up over her weathered deck and her little sanctuary bloomed with lavender and rosemary she planted herself, Harper allowed herself a small smile. She'd made it through hell. She'd rebuilt her life one blistered, bleeding brick at a time. A job at a scrappy start-up. Night shifts bartending at a dive called the Brass Mule. Community college courses to sharpen her edge. Friendships that turned into lifelines. A love, tentative but real, with Eli soft-spoken, steady, a man who asked, not assumed. She had not heard from her family in over 1,000 days. Not for her birthday. Not when her campaign won the Regional Cause Marketing Award. Not even when she bought this house. That's why, when the doorbell rang that morning and she opened it to find her entire estranged family standing there with suitcases, she thought just for a second that she might be hallucinating. Tyler? Brittany? Their 2 kids, Emma and Jake. Her parents, Rick and Carol, already stepping forward as if they'd never left. Surprise! Carol chirped, arms spread wide like the past hadn't happened. Harper didn't move. The air thickened. "You look tired, sweetheart," Rick said, peering over her shoulder. "Nice neighborhood. Real investment potential." Tyler, smug as ever, let his eyes sweep the porch. "Cute place. No pets. No kids." He smirked. "Guess it's just you in there." The silence that followed was excruciating. "That's why this works out so well," he continued. "You don't even have a family to worry about. We'll take the house." At first, Harper laughed. Not the kind of laugh that says that's a good joke, no, the kind that bubbles out involuntarily, sharp and fragile, because reality has tilted too far sideways to comprehend. "You'll what?" she asked. Brittany was already on her phone, snapping pictures of the porch. "We just love what you've done with the place. So cozy." Jake darted past Harper's legs and into the hallway like he owned the place. Emma followed, calling dibs on the biggest bedroom. Harper's mother walked straight to the kitchen as if she had cooked dinner here last night. Rick began tapping the walls. That's when Harper realized something bone deep and terrifying. They weren't here to visit. They were here to stay. They had lost their own home. Tyler was unemployed. Rick's retirement fund had tanked. Just a temporary arrangement, Carol insisted, opening Harper's fridge. 6 months. Maybe a year. They wanted Harper to move into the basement, her own basement, so the real family could have the main floor. You are not using all that space, Tyler said. You don't even have a husband or kids. And just like that, the room tilted again. Because Harper suddenly understood, this wasn't about need, it was about entitlement. They had abandoned her when she was broken. And now that she'd healed, they expected her to open the very home they let her nearly die without. She looked around at the people who once let her sleep in her car, who missed birthdays, ignored pleas, and now photographed her walls like tourists. And then Harper Lane, the woman they left behind, did something the old Harper never would have done. She smiled, cold, calm, and terrifyingly composed. I'll need you all to leave. Carol's face fell. But darling. Harper cut her off, stepping forward until her shadow stretched across the hardwood floor. You want me to give up my space, my sanctuary, to the very people who told me I had no value without a man or a mortgage? You think blood gives you keys to my front door? You're wrong. You're so very, very wrong. Rick bristled. Don't be dramatic. We raised you. Harper stared him down. No. You raised a version of me you could control. The woman who lives here now. She raised herself. Have you ever been forced to choose between your peace and your bloodline? What would you do if the people who abandoned you came back not to apologize but to take what you'd built without them? Because what Harper did next didn't just protect her home, it shattered everything her family thought they knew about her. And it began with one locked door. Rick refused to move. He stood in the center of Harper's living room, arms folded, jaw clenched, like a man still convinced he held authority over a daughter he hadn't spoken to in 3 years. Don't be ridiculous, he said. You're overreacting. We're family. Harper didn't flinch. Her voice, when it came, was low and deliberate. Family doesn't leave someone in a car to rot, then show up when it's convenient. Carol tried her usual tactic, tears. Sweetheart, we didn't know how bad things were. You knew, Harper said, eyes sharp. You just didn't care. Tyler scoffed. Jesus, Harper. So what? You're holding a grudge forever. You think you're better than us now because you have a house and a job? No, Harper said. I think I'm better off without people who only see me as a resource to exploit. The word exploit landed like a slap. Brittany's phone lowered slightly. Carol's tears stopped midstream. The kids had quieted upstairs. That's when Eli walked in. He had come straight from his run, sweat darkening his shirt, earbuds still tangled in his hand. He paused just inside the threshold, instantly sensing the atmosphere. Everything okay? He asked Harper, voice calm but firm. Her gaze flicked to him, and something inside her softened. He wasn't just her partner, he was her anchor. His presence reminded her she wasn't standing alone this time. We're fine, Rick said flatly, already bristling at the sight of another man in what he clearly believed was his daughter's domain. Eli raised an eyebrow, walked over to Harper, and without saying a word, placed a bottle of water in her hand. It was a small gesture, but in that moment, it was everything. Harper took a deep breath. Everyone needs to leave. Today. Silence. Then Tyler dropped the bomb. Well, he said, that might be a bit complicated. We've already broken our lease. Harper blinked. What? Our lease. We gave notice. We're out in 2 days. You what? Carol stepped forward, hands clasped like a penitent saint. We assumed after seeing all your success that you'd want to help. I mean, you were in need once too. Rick added, we're not asking to live here forever, just until we get back on our feet. No, Harper said. You plan to live here without asking me. You decided for me. That's not asking. That's invasion. It was Brittany who finally said what no one else dared to admit. We told the extended family you offered. That you were welcoming us back. Harper felt like the floor had disappeared beneath her. You lied. Carol flushed. We just didn't want to worry everyone. Harper stared at them, stunned. So if I say no now, I'm the villain. The cold-hearted daughter who shut the door on her homeless family. They didn't answer. They didn't have to. Harper turned away, staring out the window toward the yard where her rosemary bushes swayed gently in the breeze, calm, untouchable. Her home had been a haven, a triumph. Now it felt polluted. She gripped the back of a chair. You didn't come here for reconciliation. You came to rewrite the story. Tyler said quietly, it's not like you even have anyone else. Eli cleared his throat behind her. She has me. Harper turned and really saw the fear in her family's faces. Not fear of being homeless. Fear of losing control over someone they always believed they'd outshine, outrank, outlast. And suddenly, she understood. This wasn't just about space. It was about power. She'd broken free and they hated it. The doorbell rang. Harper's stomach twisted. She opened it slowly. Jess stood there, hair pulled into a hasty bun, holding a bag of takeout tacos and a stack of legal folders. Got your text, she said, glancing behind Harper. Is it bad? Harper stepped aside. Worse. Jess strode in like a storm. All right, everyone. I'm Jess. I'm Harper's friend and her co-tenant on that little storage unit she used to live out of. You remember that, right? When she was homeless. You remember when none of you showed up? Who the hell are you? Rick snapped. Jess didn't blink. The family she chose. She dropped the folders on the coffee table. Here's the thing. I looked into it. If any of you stay past tonight without a written rental agreement, you can claim tenant rights in the state. And that means you'd be legally protected, and Harper would have to formally evict you through court. That would cost her time and money. Which I'm guessing is exactly what you're banking on. The silence that followed was electric. Brittany turned red. Tyler swore under his breath. Rick finally sat down, eyes narrowing like a general cornered in retreat. Harper's hands were shaking. Not with fear. With clarity. This wasn't her family trying to come home. This was her past trying to reclaim territory she'd already burned and revealed. She looked at each of them. You have 2 hours. Take your things. Go. Have you ever had to choose between protecting your peace and being seen as the villain by those who once defined your worth? Because Harper is about to discover that even after you say no, the past doesn't always leave quietly. And in the next chapter, someone crosses a line that can never be uncrossed. The sun had dipped behind the rooftops by the time Rick Lane finally stood, picked up the suitcase he'd insisted on keeping by the door, and muttered, "Let's go." No one moved. Carol sat rigid on the edge of the couch, her hands clasped in her lap, as if praying for a different outcome. Tyler stood by the bookshelf, jaw twitching, refusing to look at his sister. Brittany had already stepped outside with the kids, her lips pressed in a tight line, her phone glued to her palm. And Harper stood tall, hands tucked in the pockets of her cardigan, her back against the dining table she'd once assembled with trembling hands in a tiny studio apartment she'd barely afforded. "You're making a mistake," Rick said, the bitterness in his voice hollow now, like a man whose last weapon had dulled in the fight. Harper said nothing. What was there left to say? For years, she had waited achingly, foolishly for them to say the words that might have changed everything. "I'm sorry. We were wrong. You mattered more than our pride." But those words had never come. Not when she was desperate. Not when she succeeded. Not even now, when the truth was laid bare in the middle of her living room, surrounded by cardboard boxes of someone else's expectations. Rick stepped outside into the night. Carol followed, pausing for one last glance at her daughter. Her eyes were glossy. "Harper," she whispered. And for a fleeting moment, Harper thought she might hear it, the apology that had lived in her chest for 3 years, the one she'd rehearsed in a dozen dreams. But instead, Carol simply said, "You really did paint the kitchen nicely." The door clicked shut behind her. Silence fell. Eli exhaled first. Then Jess sat down and finally allowed her shoulders to sag. Harper stood there a moment longer, eyes fixed on the front door, waiting for the guilt to come slithering in the way it always had after standing her ground. It didn't. What came instead was a strange, aching kind of stillness. Not relief. Not joy. Just space. They left 2 bags behind. One had Tyler's old hoodie and a broken toy truck. The other held a photo album leather-bound, with fading gold letters that read "Our Family." Harper found it the next morning, tucked beside the bench by the door. At first, she thought of tossing it in the trash, a symbolic purge. But something stopped her. She opened it. There were baby photos, her in a too large sun hat, grinning at the beach. Tyler beside her, chubby and gap-toothed, holding her hand. Her parents in the background, smiling like strangers from a forgotten movie. She flipped further. Birthday parties. Christmas mornings. Her high school graduation. Then she found the last photo. It was a candid shot, Harper, mid-laugh, arms around Tyler's kids, at some distant family gathering she barely remembered. Brittany must have taken it. Harper looked happy. Like she belonged. She closed the album. The truth was, she had once loved them all. Deeply. Fiercely. And part of her always would. But love, she had learned, could not exist without boundaries. Not the kind that mattered. She carried the album upstairs and slid it onto the shelf beside her marketing books. Not in a place of honor. Just somewhere it belonged, a relic of what was, not what would be. Weeks passed. The house was hers again. The kitchen echoed only her music. The scent of rosemary and citrus lingered like a quiet, living thing. And at night, Eli would press a hand to her back and murmur, "You okay?" And she would nod. Some nights she meant it. Some nights she didn't. Then one Friday, she came home to find a small box on her porch. No label. No note. Inside was the emergency key. And a letter. Harper. We're settled in a motel for now. I don't expect you to forgive us, and I won't pretend we handled things right. We didn't. But watching you stand your ground made me realize something. You are not the little sister who used to lend me gas money or cry when Dad got mad. You're someone I don't really know anymore. And maybe that's my fault. The kids miss you already. Emma asked if she could call you sometime. Only if you want, of course. No pressure. Anyway, here's your key back. You earned everything you have, and I'm sorry we ever made you feel otherwise. Tyler. Harper read it 3 times. She didn't cry. But she did smile. A small, fragile smile that stretched across the wreckage of old hurt. She tucked the letter into a drawer, locked the key away, and picked up her phone. She texted Eli, * pizza or tacos tonight. I'm finally hungry *. A month later, she stood in front of a room of strangers, the keynote speaker at a conference for women in transition, those rebuilding careers after hardship. She talked about starting over, about library Wi-Fi and gym showers, about fake smiles on job interviews and real ones with chosen family. When she stepped off the stage, a woman in the crowd stopped her. "How did you do it?" she asked. "How did you stop needing their approval?" Harper thought for a moment. Then she said, "I didn't. I just learned I could live without it." In the end, Harper Lane didn't win some perfect victory. Her family didn't apologize in the way she once longed for. They didn't come back with flowers or grace. Some rifts remained. Some wounds didn't close clean. But she built something better. A home full of intention. A life defined not by who left, but by who stayed. And when her niece Emma called one Sunday afternoon just to say hi, just to ask how her bird feeder was doing, Harper knew that sometimes healing doesn't come all at once. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in the voice of a child, years after you stopped hoping. What part of Harper's story resonated most with you, and what would you have done in her place? Comment 100 if the story touched you. Tell us where you're watching from. We'd love to know what part of the world you're in. If you believe someone needs to hear this, please share this video with them. Thank you for watching Life Stories.